Hello! Welcome to our first video in our Introduction to Economics series. No, this isn't a class, no dry textbooks to read, no confusing tests, just what you as a layperson need to know. One thing I've noticed is that there aren't a lot of people who understand the basics of economics, and this causes them to reach all sorts of conclusions that are not only incorrect, but cause them to act against their own interests or stated goals. Even intelligent skeptics repeatedly display an almost shameful deficiency of the subject. So over the next 5 short videos, we'll get you up to speed. And not only will you have the information you'll need to stop making a lot of bad decisions for yourself, you'll also be able to recognize when politicians and TV pundits are either being ignorant of economics or feeding you a line of bull. We'll begin with part 1, this video. It's just an economics primer. We're going very basic here. We'll talk about what economics is, what it covers, what it's all about, what a transaction is, and we'll also cover the all-important concept of supply and demand. Part 2 is going to be lesson 1. And I know what you're thinking, isn't this lesson 1? Well, yeah. But part 2 will be lesson 1, as in the big one, the number 1 lesson, the thing that you really need to know to understand economics. And I've seen this violated so much on TV, in the news, and by politicians and presidential candidates, we need to devote a whole video to it. Part 3 is going to be interesting, something called the wisdom of crowds. I think you'll be amazed. Part 4 is going to be on price controls. We're going to talk about concepts such as price gouging. We'll talk about what happens to prices in disasters and shortages. We'll talk about some big issues like minimum wage and interest rates. And we'll talk about what happens when the government tries to manipulate all of this. Finally, the 5th video will be on unemployment. We'll cover voluntary unemployment, which is the only kind of unemployment you can have in a free market, and what causes that and what it's all about. And we'll talk about the various forms of involuntary unemployment, which is unemployment that is either directly or indirectly caused by government policies. It comes in 2 flavors. Perpetual unemployment, which is roughly the same year by year, or maybe it grows steadily or whatever. And cyclical unemployment, that goes up and goes down and goes up and goes down. So let's get started with our economics primer. Economics is, to put it simply, the study of human behavior in the aggregate. We're not trying to see what individuals are doing and trying to figure them out. We're kind of zooming out and seeing what overall patterns we can see in how humans behave when they interact with each other in a complex web of hundreds, thousands, or even millions of people. So the things we say aren't necessarily going to be true of an individual person. Different people are different. Any good theory of economics accounts for that. Now, economics is based on 2 principles. The first is resources are limited. There's only so much stuff in the world. There's only so many things we can do with that stuff. And there's only so much time we have to do it with. And that's going to cause issues for our second principle. Desires are unlimited. We always want more. We want more stuff. We want a better life. We want a better life for our kids. And this is true of everybody. I once heard one guy say to me, "Well, I'm not like that. I've got everything I want. I don't want for anything more. I've got my wife. I've got my family. I've got enough wealth to be comfortable. I don't want any more, and so this second principle of yours doesn't apply to me." And I said to him, "Are you telling me that if your wife got cancer, you would not want a cure?" No. There's always something, no matter what it is. Now, a lot of people call this greed, but it just doesn't fit the popular definition of the word greed. In economics, the word greed simply means that you want something more than what already exists. But it doesn't have to be selfish. It could just be about wanting to cure cancer, wanting to feed the poor, wanting to go out in space and colonize other planets, whatever. However lofty your desire, however generous, however altruistic, it is still a desire and still unlimited. Now, if we talk about greed in an economics context, we need to talk about another concept that's just as important: loss aversion. Just as we want more than what we have now, we don't want to lose what we've already obtained. And yet, satisfying greed, whether it's bettering your own life or continuing the progress of humanity, comes with risk. Loss aversion is what keeps greed in check. So much of human behavior, and especially the kind that economics is concerned with, is about a risk-benefit analysis. What do I stand to lose if I try to achieve this, and is it worth the potential gains? These two principles, resources are limited and desires are unlimited, are the first principles of economics. From them, we get a third. People are always going to try to do more to fill those desires. And the first thing that means is that a free market always tends towards full employment. Because we've got all these people, and people, in the economic sense of the term, are resources. And we can get them to help us meet some of our desires in exchange for a wage or salary. That's called labor. Labor is one of the three key components of production. The other two are natural resources, which is the stuff we get from the planet, and there's capital. Basically, capital is everything we need that isn't labor or natural resources. Let's say we have a whole bunch of people on a planet, and this planet has water and trees and metal and everything else, but there have never been any humans here, so there are no roads or factories or anything. So how do we make things? Even if we want to make something simple like wooden spoons, we need something to cut the trees with. To get an axe, we need to find a suitable rock and figure out how to sharpen it into a blade and securely attach it to a stick. We'll need to figure out how to bang out plate metal and serrate the edge to make a saw. We'll have to make knives and other tools to carve out the finished shape. Doing all that means that people are going to have to give up something, time, effort, resources, whatever, for no immediate gain. The gain can only come later, once sufficient capital is created to get everything going. That's called delayed gratification. Another word for it is investment. It is absolutely crucial to the formation of capital, and you just can't have production without it. Okay, we still need to ask one crucial question. At what price? What's it worth to you to have this extra thing that you want? This is how the finite resources are managed in the economy. Because if there's only so much, then you've got to manage it somehow, and the price mechanism is how you do it. The more scarce the resource is, all other things being equal, the higher the price. This encourages conservation of scarce resources and the development of alternatives. If you're in an area with lots of water, and so it's cheap, you're going to do lots of things with it, such as bathe and wash your clothes. But if you're out in the desert, and you don't have that much water to get you through it, you're going to forego using it to wash your clothes and use it solely for drinking. Now, of course, normally we think of the price as being the dollar amount that you charge for it, or whatever currency you're using. But there are other things that are involved in the price, such as the time outlay. The price of having the job is the worker's time. The price to the employer is the wages. Both sides pay and both sides receive. And this brings us to the fundamental action in economics, something that, once you understand it, is nothing short of a miracle. The transaction. A transaction is a voluntary agreement between two people to give each other something. They both give something, and they both get something. Just to keep it basic, let's say you go to a convenience store, you're thirsty, and so you buy a Coke. The Coke will satisfy your urge to quench your thirst, and also taste good and give you a pleasant experience. The value you get from the product is known as utility. Now, let's say this Coke costs $1. So you take the Coke up to the counter, and the shop owner rings it up and he says, "That'll be $1. You give him the $1, and he gives you the Coke. Now, why did that happen? Well, it happened because you valued the Coke more than you valued the $1. Conversely, the shop owner valued the $1 more than he valued the Coke. If that wasn't the case on both sides, then the transaction would not have taken place. When a transaction is voluntary, both sides win. They're both more wealthy than when they started. Unless there's some kind of force or fraud going on, transactions are always win-win. Both sides are better off. Also, since the shop owner doesn't get the same utility out of the Coke that you do, this ultimately means that the free market ends up getting resources to where they can do the most good, to the people for whom they will have the greatest utility. The free market economy is by far the best system for managing scarce resources than anyone has ever found. And we'll support that statement more in this series. Now, this win-win nature of transactions is true whether they're buying something or whether it's employment. Because if you think about what I said earlier, both sides are giving up something. The employee is giving up his time and effort. The employer is giving up his money. The employee does it because he values the money more than he values that amount of time and effort, and the employer does it because he values the work that he gets from that employee more than he values the money he pays him. It's a voluntary transaction, and it's win-win for both sides. So from this, we come to another principle, which is that in a free market, wealth always increases. And a lot of people, when you talk about wealth, seem to think that you're talking about dollar amounts. Well, no. Wealth is kind of a nebulous thing. It's just what you personally value. Increasing your wealth means that more of your desires are fulfilled. And since desires are infinite, the tendency of the market is to always get greater value and to always increase more wealth. And so what that means is that people, according to their own estimates, always end up better off than they were before. If that's ever not the case, then it's because of some government intervention or criminal activity or some kind of natural disaster or something else that happens outside of the market forces. So what are these market forces doing? It's all based on supply and demand. Here's the supply and demand graph that you've probably seen elsewhere. The supply curve is upward sloping. What that means is that suppliers want to provide more of a particular item at higher prices and less at lower prices. The demand curve is downward sloping, which means that people want to buy more of it when it's at a lower price than they do when it's at a higher price. Now, where these two curves cross, we have equilibria. We have an equilibrium price and an equilibrium quantity. We'll talk more about this when we talk about price controls, and we'll talk about what happens when you get away from this. But for the purposes of this video, just know that the economy is always going to be seeking the equilibrium price and quantity so that there are no shortages or surpluses and that there is no overcharging or undercharging. Now, it's tempting to think that there's got to be some magic dollar value where you can set the price and everything's fine. Well, it doesn't work that way. First of all, there's no way to get the information you need to calculate it. You'd need to survey every single person in the economy, and they may not even have the conscious awareness of what they will need or value at any particular moment. Also, things change. People change their minds and suddenly value different things many times a day as they go about their business. This is why it's technically wrong to say that prices are set at equilibrium, but rather they seek equilibrium. It's not even like trying to shoot a moving target. It's like trying to shoot a moving target that you can't even see, only get vague hints about where it might have been recently. But prices do tend to move towards equilibrium as people make various decisions as consumers and business owners. It's imperfect and everything fluctuates, but it's the best system we know of to get prices where they need to be. We'll go more into this concept in the next video, Lesson 1, the big one that you need to learn and keep in mind. For now, though, you should have a much better concept of what economics is and what its basic driving principles are. We'll see you next time. Lesson 1. The art of economics consists in looking not merely at the immediate, but at the longer effects of any act or policy. It consists in tracing the consequences of that policy, not merely for one group, but for all groups. We'll talk about what that means in Part 2.